The rain hadn't let up for hours. Gray sheets blurred the sidewalks of downtown D.C., where figures hurried beneath umbrellas, too distracted to notice the man standing in the alcove of the federal building's loading dock. He wasn't panhandling. He wasn't speaking. Just standing, shoulders hunched beneath a threadbare military jacket, stained with time and soaked through. His boots, once government issue, had holes in the soles. He hadn't eaten in 2 days. Security was called not because he posed a threat, but because someone said he looked out of place. Officers approached cautiously, expecting resistance. But the man simply raised his hands, palms outward, eyes down. He didn't run. He didn't speak. When they cuffed him, he nodded once. It was Officer Daniels who noticed it. As the man turned, a glint caught the overhead light, something metallic, hanging from a frayed cord around his neck. Daniels reached under the jacket, revealing the unmistakable gold star and blue ribbon of a Medal of Honor. The booking clerk at the precinct paused. "Is this real?" he muttered, holding the medal as if it might burn him. The man offered no name, no explanation. No ID, no history. He was entered into the system as John Doe, charged with trespassing on federal property. No priors. No listed residence. When his case was scheduled for arraignment, no one expected much. A formality. A quiet sentencing. Maybe 30 days or time served. But Judge Raymond Callahan, a former JAD officer and Gulf War veteran, noticed the Medal of Honor line buried in the arrest note. He paused mid-scroll and leaned back in his chair. A nameless man, wearing the nation's highest military honor, now standing trial for wandering too close to a government building? He flagged the case. In the days leading up to the hearing, whispers began to spread. Courtroom staff murmured about the ghost Marine. No attorney had been assigned, yet he'd made no request for one. When the morning of the arraignment arrived, the gallery was unexpectedly full. Veterans, a few reporters, even civilians who'd heard rumors. He entered quietly, wrists shackled in front, led by a bailiff. He didn't lift his head. The courtroom, already hushed, grew utterly still. His jacket bore fading patches. His eyes, when briefly visible beneath unkempt hair, were distant, staring at something far beyond the 4 courtroom walls. No one knew his name, but the medal spoke volumes. The judge cleared his throat. "Before we proceed," he said slowly, "I want the record to reflect something unusual." He held up a paper. The arresting officer's notes, highlighted and underlined. The man said nothing. Outside, the rain eased for the first time in days. Inside, attention took its place, quiet, pressing, and waiting. And in the silence, the question began to form in every mind present. Who was this man? And how did a national hero become invisible? ***. Weeks passed. Courtrooms faded into offices. Headlines dimmed. But inside a quiet facility on the outskirts of the city, a man began to reassemble the fragments of his life. His name, once hidden under layers of silence and bureaucracy, had been restored: Corporal James Matthew Reed. His identity confirmed through dusty military records and testimony from former squadmates, men who hadn't seen him in over a decade but still remembered him as the one who stayed behind. He didn't speak much during the hearings that followed. His attorneys, appointed by the Veterans Advocacy Program, handled the legal aspects. But what mattered most wasn't the dismissal of charges, it was the recognition of something deeper. The system hadn't just failed him. It had forgotten him. At a private session held without press, 2 surviving Marines from his old unit spoke on his behalf. One, now wheelchair-bound, recounted how Reed had pulled him from a burning vehicle during an ambush. "I'm alive because of him," he said, voice unsteady. "And we left him behind, not the other way around." The judge, again presiding, issued a formal statement. "While Corporal Reed stands here as a defendant, this court acknowledges its own failure, as part of a society that honors in ceremony but forgets in practice. Today we begin to correct that." The trespassing charge was dismissed. The record sealed. Through the coordinated effort of several veteran organizations, Reed was given housing in a modest studio apartment, clean, warm, private. He declined television, requested no phone. But he accepted a small potted plant someone left on the windowsill. He watered it every morning. The Medal of Honor was returned to him in a velvet case. He placed it on a simple shelf beside a photo of his old platoon, sun-faded and bent at the corners, the smiles worn but still visible. He never sought attention. No interviews. No speeches. Just silence and the slow return to being seen. Some nights, he sat by the window and watched traffic below. He didn't write. He didn't call anyone. But he no longer looked away when people passed by. He no longer flinched at his own reflection. It was a quiet redemption. Not dramatic. Not perfect. But real. In a letter sent weeks later, Judge Callahan wrote simply, "The world may never know what you carried. But I hope now it will remember who you are." The letter was never answered. But it remained on the table, unfolded, beside the photo and the medal. Because some stories don't need loud endings. They need to be witnessed. And remembered. Court reconvened 20 minutes later. The room, though subdued, vibrated with a quiet urgency. The prosecution returned without the usual fire in their argument. The defense, still absent as the Marine had declined counsel, remained an empty seat beside him. But he didn't seem to notice. His hands rested calmly on the defense table, bound but steady. His eyes never left the floor. Judge Callahan exhaled slowly, folding the Medal of Honor citation back into its folder. "This court must consider the full weight of this man's story," he began, his voice low but firm. "We are not here to relitigate war. But we are, perhaps, called to reckon with what follows after it." He turned to the courtroom. "I will now read the citation again, this time in its entirety." The judge's voice was steadier now, but beneath the control was something raw. As he read, the words filled the room like a rising tide. Descriptions of chaos, valor, and the moment a wounded Marine chose to stay behind so others could live. Something shifted. One by one, those in the courtroom began to rise. A veteran in dress blues stood first. Then another, still wearing a service pin on his blazer. Civilians followed, uncertain but respectful. The clerk stood. The bailiff stood. The prosecuting attorney stood. Even the arresting officer, seated in the rear, got to his feet. The Marine remained seated, unmoved. His head slightly bowed, his expression unreadable. Whether he heard the words or had long since detached from them, no one could tell. But in the silence that followed the reading, something sacred had occurred. The judge nodded once and recessed again, this time for deliberation. When he returned, his decision came not as a sentence, but a shift in course. "This man," Callahan said, "deserves not a punishment but a plan." He ordered a full psychological evaluation and appointed a team from the Veterans Advocacy Program to represent the Marine in all further proceedings. The court provided temporary housing in a VA-approved shelter and directed local support services to step in. Charges were not dropped, but neither were they pursued with haste. "This isn't about mercy," Callahan concluded. "It's about responsibility. Ours." For the first time, the Marine raised his head. His eyes met the judge's. No words were exchanged, but something passed between them, recognition, perhaps. Or understanding. Outside, the rain had stopped entirely. Sunlight pooled at the courthouse steps, thin but insistent. The crowd dispersed slowly, as though leaving a vigil. Whispers now gave way to reflection. And in that pause between judgment and redemption, a nation's silence spoke louder than any gavel. By the time the court assembled, the air was different, thick with curiosity and unease. Rows usually half empty for minor cases were now filled. A quiet murmur passed between strangers. "Is it true? A Medal of Honor recipient? What happened to him?" No one had answers, only questions. The man stood exactly as he had days before, hands cuffed, posture rigid, expression blank. His uniform, though degraded by time, still carried remnants of its former dignity. One sleeve was torn at the seam. A bootlace had been replaced with a frayed strip of cloth. He hadn't shaved. He hadn't asked for representation. Judge Callahan entered, eyes scanning the gallery, lips pursed. He wasn't one for spectacle, but today's case had pried something open in him, something buried beneath years of legal protocol and professional detachment. He tapped the microphone gently. Before the court proceeds, the record shall include documentation of a military distinction found on the defendant's person. He glanced toward the bailiff. Please enter Exhibit A. A clerk stepped forward with a file. Inside, a scanned copy of the Medal of Honor citation. The original medal had been placed in temporary custody for verification. It was, indeed, genuine. Callahan adjusted his glasses and began to read aloud. In the face of overwhelming enemy fire, Corporal James M. He paused, surprised to find a full name, refused evacuation after sustaining critical injuries, maintaining defensive position to allow the extraction of 12 wounded soldiers. The words echoed off the paneled walls. Every syllable landed like a stone dropped in still water. Even those unfamiliar with military tradition recognized the gravity. One line described how he dragged a fellow Marine across 200 meters of open terrain under fire. Another recounted that he had refused morphine so he could stay alert and cover his squad's retreat. As the citation went on, a man in the third row, a veteran in a faded cap, removed it and held it to his chest. A woman near the back wiped her eyes. The Marine did not flinch. He remained still as stone, as if the words applied to someone else. When the judge finished, silence reclaimed the room. Callahan leaned forward, voice softer now. Corporal James M. You are here today on charges of trespassing. But this court cannot ignore the facts of your service. They are not an excuse. But they are context. Still no reply. Not even a glance. The prosecuting attorney closed his folder. Your Honor, I'd like to request a brief recess. Approved. As the gavel tapped, people filed out slowly, quiet, reverent. They'd come expecting to witness a routine proceeding. Instead, they'd stood in the shadow of something far larger, not a crime, but a forgotten sacrifice. In the hallway, the whispers began again, only now tinged with something new. Not pity, respect, and beneath that a quiet shame.